Okay, so in February, I started a journey of reading the Vampire Academy books, and I just finished the last one, which I do have over here. There. I just finished the last one, so it is now time to wrap this series up. Hello and welcome to the wrap up of Vampire Academy. Okay, this wrap up is going to be spoiler filled because I just don't see it working without being spoiler filled, and I want to talk about things that occurred in the book. So you have been warned, if you have not read the series, this may not be the video for you until you have, or if you're up to a certain point in the series, maybe watch until we get up to the book you're up to. So, this series was interesting to say the least, and as far as my ratings were concerned, were very up and down. So starting off with book 1, Vampire Academy. So this book introduces us to this world. Basically, that's its goal. We're introduced to two characters, Rosemary Hathaway, who prefers to be called Rose, and Vasilisa Dragomir, who prefers to be called Lissa. Rose is a Dhampir, which means she is half vampire, half human, and Vasilisa is a Moroi, which makes her a royal vampire. So, or a pure vampire, but a royal pure vampire. So, the book is set, the first book is set at Vampire Academy, hence the name of the title. And if you've read Harry Potter, which I love, then it's kind of a vampire twist on Harry Potter, kind of, in that the academy is an academy for vampires. So, with Rose being a Dhampir, and with Lissa being a Moroi, both types of vampires attend this school, but they are both treated very separately. The Moroi are treated for like the royalty that they are. In fact, the Dhampir, who we're going to get to in a moment, walk around with a saying on their lips. They come first, and that is the Moroi. So, the royal vampires are treated like, everyone should kiss the ground that they walk on, basically, and if one hair is out of place on their head, there will be trouble. Meanwhile, the Dhampirs are living the very tough life because they are training to become guardians of the Moroi. So, once a Dhampir has graduated from the academy, they then go on to work full-time as a bodyguard, I guess, a guardian, which is like a bodyguard for the Moroi. Because in this world there are evil vampires, and the evil vampires are known as the Strigoi. So Strigoi are turned, I don't know how the very first Strigoi was turned, that would be something interesting to find out, but because when we start off with book 1, there are already so many Strigoi are turned by being bitten by another, Moroi or Dhampirs are turned into Strigoi by being bitten by a Strigoi. And if the Strigoi only drinks a little bit of blood, then they turn into a Strigoi, but if the Strigoi drinks a lot of blood, then obviously that will kill them. Okay, so now you've got the basic premise of what's going on. So in this first book, we're just getting the lay of the land, really, and there is a lot of world building that goes on, so we get to experience what Vampire Academy is about and the differences between Dhampirs and Morois, how they're treated, the sort of classes that they go to. Very different. We also meet Vasilisa's uncle, I think? A relation of Vasilisa anyway, named Victor Dashkov, which sets a lot of things in motion because, here comes the big spoiler, Victor Dashkov ends up being a really evil guy. Well, in the sense that it turns out Victor Dashkov is dying, and the only way for him to not die is to use Vasilisa to save him. So, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that the Moroi, every single Moroi is gifted with a magical ability that comes back to an element. So, it's either earth, air, fire, or water. And it turns out that Vasilisa doesn't have any of those, and for a long time she's struggling to try and work out what magical ability she does have. And it turns out that she has one of the biggest, not one of, actually the biggest magical ability, which is the magical ability of spirit, which does a lot of different things throughout the course of the series. We find out really early on that prior to this book taking place, that Rose ended up in a really bad car accident where she technically died, but Vasilisa, without thinking or even knowing what she's doing, somehow brought Rose back from the dead. This created a bond between Rose and Vasilisa where Rose is connected in a one-way connection. Rose is connected to Vasilisa, and whenever she allows herself to connect to Vasilisa, she can see what's going on through Vasilisa's eyes. This makes this series incredibly intriguing because there are times where Rose is placed in a situation that is rather boring, and so she will go into Vasilisa's mind and see what's going on with her, which allows us to see something that's a lot more action-packed than Rose being in a boring situation, and I really did appreciate that. So Victor Dashkov knows that Lissa has spirit, and he wants to use her to cure his illness that he has, but eventually they end up saving Lissa, and the only reason they end up saving Lissa is because of the bond that Rose has. She's able to see through Lissa's eyes where she is and lead the Guardians to where she is to save her. Another thing we need to touch upon is Dimitri. Those of you who have read this series will have your opinion, and I certainly have mine. Wait till we get to book 6. So, Rose and Lissa, prior to the book beginning, Rose was tracked down by one of the educators at the school, Miss Sonia Karp, who advises Rose to take Lissa away from the school because she's going to have a tough time handling what she's going through, which no one knew what it was, and then eventually they worked out it was spirit. But, to take her away from there. So Rose does that. Meanwhile, while Rose and Vasilisa are out having run away from the school, Sonia Karp is turned into a Strigoi, and so eventually Rose and Vasilisa are caught and brought back to the school, and they can't say, oh, Sonia Karp told us to do this because Sonia Karp is now a Strigoi. So, I mean, yeah, that excuse kind of falls by the wayside because no one really, trusts Strigoi, and that's fair, but yeah, you kind of need to know that. When Rose comes back to the school, the headmistress Karova, is considering kicking Rose out of the school because it's just one problem after another with you, Miss Hathaway. Gosh. Love this principal. Don't love that she wants to kick Rose out, but I loved her from the get-go. And there is a new teacher, a new guardian at the school by the name of Dimitri Belikov, and Dimitri, not really knowing Rose, ends up sticking up for her and saying, we should keep her around and I will train with her and I will help her to catch up. And so that's exactly what happens. Rose, every day before and after class, she needs to go and be with Dimitri and do one-on-one training to catch up to where everyone else is, because her and Lissa have been away for a long time. So, the book ends with Rose falling in love with Dimitri. Nothing happens, but it's one-sided, but she falls in love with Dimitri, and it starts this journey of love and happiness, and I didn't like that part if you can't tell. I ended up giving this book 3 stars because I found the book to be rather meandering until the final quarter, which just blew me away. It was really good and I couldn't wait to get to book 2. So this book received 3 stars. The second book in the series is Frostbite. So this book is Rose and Vasilisa in their second year at Vampire Academy. And I forgot to mention Christian in the first book. Christian Ozera is a Moroi whose parents have been turned, his parents willingly turned into Strigoi. So the Ozera name has been mud ever since that moment, because how dare you want to willingly turn into a Strigoi? This world is very opinionated, but anyway. So Christian receives a lot of flack because of what his parents did, which is totally unfair, but it got me on side with Christian very early on. And Christian gets to know Vasilisa, and Vasilisa, more importantly, gets to know Christian, and eventually they end up falling in love, and it's a really beautiful little arc that they go through. In the meantime, things continue on with Dimitri and Rose. Rose keeps training with him, and he, excuse me, he does a really good job with her. And eventually, they end up going out to a mall, and I'm still trying to remember why it was. I mean, I read this in April, so it was a long time ago. Sorry, I read this in March, so even longer. They end up going to a mall, Rose and Eddie is another Dhampir, to find these other students who had gone there and hadn't come home. And they end up finding something at the mall that ends up having them being captured, and they eventually get away. Oh, yeah, they eventually get away, but at the cost of one of Rose's best friends, whose name is Mason. Mason, this is a one-sided crush that's going on here. Mason has a massive amount of love. He's very much in love with Rose, but Rose is not in love with Mason, but then Mason dies and Rose ends up regretting the fact that she couldn't show him any love herself. So that's what ends up happening there. You need to know that Mason died at the end of the second book because it heavily impacted the third book. I end up giving this book 3 stars because of the same reason with Vampire Academy. 3 quarters meandering, but the final quarter was intriguing enough to make me want to pick up the next book, which was Shadow Kiss, the third book in the series. This was my first 5 stars in the series because I love this book from start to end. So in this book, we learn a little more about Rose, and we find out a little later on in the series why what I'm about to tell you is happening. But Rose ends up seeing, I don't want to say dead people because it just sounds so wrong, but Rose ends up seeing the ghosts of dead people, shall we say. And one person that she keeps seeing is Mason. Mason won't talk to her, but he just seems really, really sad. He either won't or can't, one of the two. And yeah, it's really heartbreaking to see Rose experiencing this. And it also seems very traumatizing for Rose. So, Rose and Dimitri's relationship really develops in this third book. I don't remember if Dimitri reciprocates... Oh, hang on, he does. Dimitri reciprocates Rose's feelings in book 1, but it's done in a horrible way. Victor Dashkov kind of puts a spell on them, or makes them drink a potion or something like that, which is a potion or a spell of infatuation, and they end up doing the dirty in book 1. But after the spell wears off, they both realize that they were only doing it because of the spell. So in book 3, they both they both fall in love and get into a relationship finally, and it is really beautiful. And they do the dirty for the first time without a spell, and it's just a really nice and beautiful moment. But then the Strigoi are advancing on Vampire Academy itself, and so the Guardians as well as the teachers need to go out and try and deal with the situation because, again, with the Moroi, they come first. So it turns out that the Strigoi have captured some of the either Moroi or Dhampirs, I'm still trying to work it out, in a cave that's very near to the school, and the only way that Rose found out where the Strigoi was because she found a way to acquire a map and showed it to Mason, the ghost of Mason, who was able to point out the trail for her, which I thought was a really good idea. Anyway, we go in for the rescue, and something incredibly massive ends up happening. After falling in love with this really romantically, pleasantly beautiful relationship between Rose and Dimitri, Dimitri ends up going in to try and rescue everyone, and eventually Rose needs to as well. Despite the fact that she's still a student, everyone that they have there, they've sent in, and it's down to Rose and one other guy and a teacher, and no one's coming out, so Rose has to go in as well. And almost everyone that went in, from what I remember, makes it back out, but Dimitri does not. And then we go back in to realise that there's a reason why Dimitri has not made it out, and it's not that he's dead, which almost would have been better for me, because it has a bigger sense of finality, but instead Dimitri is turned into a Strigoi, which I was not happy with, and Rose becomes very upset and temperamental and just very angry and wild about it, which I can completely understand. Finally, these two are happily in love, and now Dimitri is a Strigoi. Now he's the enemy. So, yeah, I did love this book. It was really, really good, and Rose, at the end of the book, Rose says, I don't care what it takes, I have to go and kill Dimitri now. Because Dimitri had told Rose somewhere within the first 3 books, just on a whim, if ever I became a Strigoi, I would prefer to die than to live my life as a Strigoi. So Rose takes it upon herself to venture out and kill him so that he doesn't have to be a Strigoi anymore. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was so entertaining all the way through from start to end, and was, as I said, the first 5-star book for me for the Vampire Academy series. Which leads us to the 4th book in the series, Blood Promise, aka Total and Utter Disaster. Okay, I did not like this book, in case you didn't get that from what I just said. I did not like this at all. So, book 3 sets us up with Rose going to track down Dimitri, as I said, because she wants to give him his wish, kill him so he doesn't have to be a Strigoi, but in order to do so, she doesn't know where he is, and this book enacts the trope that I like the least, which is the let's go questing even though we have no idea where we're going or how we're going to get there or what we're even looking for. Yes, Rose knows what she's looking for and she knows what she wants to do, but she has no idea in the whole wide world where Dimitri is. So she's just thinking, I'll just go to this random country, which, by the way, is Russia. I'll just go to Russia, because that's not a big country at all, and I'll just traverse Russia until I find Dimitri. Let's hope he's not in, I don't know, Africa or Switzerland, because Rose has decided she's going to Russia, even though she has no idea where he is. I mean, really. So the first half of the book was incredibly boring, because we're traveling around Russia, and Rose doesn't know where he is, doesn't know where she's going, she just knows she has to keep going, and it's incredibly boring. There is one saving grace for this book. I'm sorry about the glare. There is one saving grace for this book, and that is that we get to meet the Belikov family, because Rose ends up in an accident, and she is taken by Abe Mazur, who is very well known in Russia as the Zmei, the Snake. He is like the biggest mob mafia boss kind of guy. Anything you want done, you go through Abe and it will get done. And Sydney Sage, who is an alchemist. So while she is in the back of their car, they've rescued her from somewhere, I don't know, something happened and she blacked out. I don't remember what it was. Apparently, while she's blacked out, she says the name Belikov, and Abe Mazur knows that name and so takes her to the house of Belikov, and she gets to meet all of Dimitri's family. That was really nice and beautiful. I really appreciated meeting all of them, but then all of a sudden Rose completely forgets about her quest to go and find Dimitri, because now she's with the Belikovs and she has to tell them that Dimitri is now a Strigoi, which in Russian culture, in the world of Vampire Academy, being a Strigoi, even though you're still alive per se, alive as an evil vampire, in Russian culture in this world, it's like you're dead. It's like you're not alive anymore, you're dead, so we might as well have a funeral for you. It's a really big deal. where in America, where Vampire Academy is set, it's more, or Vampire Academy culture anyway, at the school, it's more, oh, you're a Strigoi and we have to kill you, you're still alive. So, very big cultural difference. They end up celebrating Dimitri's, well, not celebrating so much, but yeah, they end up commiserating Dimitri's death. It was nice to see his family, but Rose completely throws away the fact that she's looking for Dimitri and stops, and we are wasting time at the House of Belikov. I loved meeting the family, but hello, we have a mission here. Why have we stopped? So finally, Rose ends up continuing to try and find him, and eventually she does find him. And the final quarter of the book, which really annoyed me because I just wish that this happened from like the third or fourth chapter onwards because we would have more time. But the final quarter of the book only is Rose being with Dimitri and trying to work out what to do. Dimitri ends up holding Rose captive, and he tells her that she has two options. One, that he'll either turn her into a Strigoi too, or he will kill her. And that's up to her. She doesn't have long to decide. He's very impatient now. And yeah, he's a very dark being. He no longer has any love at all. He's a Strigoi. So, eventually Rose finds a way to escape this room that he has her trapped in, and she kills him eventually. Like, right towards the end, like the end of the second last chapter, she kills him. Okay, yay, it's over. Can we get back to the academy now? So we do. And then right at the end of this book, Rose receives a letter. And the letter's basically saying, I guess I didn't train you well enough, because you would think that you would try to make sure that when you stake a Strigoi, that it actually is dead before you walk away. I'm still alive, and I'm going to make it my personal mission to track you down and kill you. Love, Dimitri. So he is still alive. And that really annoyed me too. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, but I really could have given it 2 stars very easily. I gave it 3 stars because the writing style was great, and I loved meeting Dimitri's family. I also loved some of the scenes with Rose and Dimitri while Rose was being held captive, but otherwise, it just annoyed me that I thought he was dead and now he is not, and it didn't make me emotional. It didn't upset me. It just annoyed me to think, oh god, now we've got to do this again. Like, we've already done this. Why do we have to do it again? So, 3 stars. Okay, book 4. That was book 4. Book 5, Spiritbound. So I went into Spiritbound really disappointed with, obviously, with Blood Promise. And I had no idea what to expect. Dimitri's going to try and track Rose down. Let's see how this goes. So this book opens up with Rose doing a trial. It's her final year at school, or her final, I think it's like her last day at school or something. And so she has to do a trial, and if she passes the trial, then she becomes a fully fledged guardian. She does end up passing the trial, and oh, sorry, I left out a reveal for this book. We find out at the end of this book that Abe Mazur, the Zmei, the guy that took Rose to the Belikovs, is actually Rose's birth father for the first 3 books, or 4. Most of 4 as well. We don't know who Rose's father is. We just know that his mother was with someone, and we don't know where he is. And now Zmei, Abe, is her dad. The reason I remember that is because in this book, Rose ends up competing, not competing, but doing her trial, and Abe is there as well. I need to backpedal. Oh my goodness. I can't believe how much I need to backpedal. Back to Frostbite. Okay. Because I'm just remembering things like in little snippets. In Frostbite, we are introduced to a character that is amazing. His name is Adrian Ivashkov, and Adrian is a brooding, young, devil may care attitude kind of guy, and I fell in love with this guy from the moment. I'm so sorry about the glare. It's a glossy cover. There's nothing I can do. I'm sorry. And yeah, just very much fell in love with him. This guy is someone who is a moroi. He is high school level. He smokes cigarettes and drinks alcohol every day, and he does not care what anyone else thinks. He's just going to live his life his own way. And he falls for Rose the moment they first meet, calling her Little Dumpia, which he keeps doing throughout the entire series. Eventually, not in book 2, but I think at the end of book 4, actually, book 3. So, at the end of book 3, Rose, knowing full well that Adrian is head over heels in love with her for the entire book, goes to him, knowing that Dimitri is a strigoi, and says to him, I need to go off and do something. I don't have the money to do this. Would you be willing to give me the money, knowing full well that he would? Adrian is very, very rich. His whole family, his auntie is the queen of this world. So, yeah, he's very rich. He gives her the money to go off and do what she does in this book, go to Russia and try and kill Dimitri. But he says to her, I'll make a deal with you. I will fund this trip, but only if, when you get back, you give me a chance and you actually date me. So because Rose comes back at the end of book 4, she does start dating Adrian Ivashkov. So, in Last Sacrifice, Rose is doing the trial to graduate, and Abe Mazur, her father, and Adrian Ivashkov, her boyfriend, are in the stands having a very uncomfortable conversation for Adrian, where Abe is doing the whole fatherly thing, telling him all the things that he'll do to Adrian if he hurts Rose. We're also introduced to Adrian's family, so we meet his mother, Daniela, and his father, who I don't remember what his name is, but anyway, that's okay. And this is the wrong book. We're talking about this book, sorry. This has been fun. And Rose graduates, and then after she graduates, she finds out that her trial was actually the hardest trial of the lot. Because of things that she's experienced that her classmates hadn't, to make it fair, they upped the ante in her trial, and she still got the highest mark out of everyone in her class. So that was pretty cool. Her mum, who is a very strict guardian, was very proud of her as well, and so was Abe the Zmei, and of course Adrian too. So Rose and Vasilisa, prior to graduation, go to court, which is the name of the kingdom in this world, and Vasilisa has a discussion with the queen, Adrian's aunt, Queen Tatiana, who says to her that she would like for Vasilisa to live at court because it will just be really good to have someone like her at the court. And Vasilisa says no, and the queen says, well, dearie, I am queen and you have no choice. Well, no, she doesn't say that, but, I mean, she could have. But in the end, she said, well, dearie, well, no, she didn't, but that would have been funny. She said, okay, well, you tell me what you want and I'll do a trade with you. The Moroi, because they are vampires, the law is that they can only go to these very virtually unknown universities or colleges because of the risk. And Vasilisa wants to go to a more popular school called Lehigh because Lehigh offers things that she wants to do. So the queen says, I'll let you go to Lehigh. If you transfer here first, I will ensure that it happens for you. And she does, and they move in. And they have an interesting time. Rose is given guardian duties. She ends up doing something wrong. I don't remember what it was. They try to break Victor Dashkov out of prison, because he's in prison by now, to work out if you can reverse the fate of a strigoi. Yes, and Victor Dashkov's brother tells Rose, Adrian, and Eddie, and Lisa that yes, you can, provide you charm a silver stake with spirit, and it's done the right way. If you then stake the strigoi, it turns back into a dumpia. And so we spend the rest of this book with Rose trying to track down Dimitri, who's trying to track down Rose to get this to happen and get him to become a dumpia again. Christian, who is Vasilisa's boyfriend, on again, off again, but at the moment they still are, has the ability of fire, creates a ring of fire around Dimitri. Lisa thrusts her hand through the fire. It takes a few attempts, but eventually stabs Dimitri. Dimitri becomes a Dampier again. Woohoo! But everyone doesn't trust him, and they put him in jail because they think he's still a strigoi, but turns out he is not. He is a Dampier. Rose tries to fall back in love with him, but he wants nothing to do with Rose, and his love for her is gone. At the end of the book, Rose is arrested because they're still at court. At the end of the book, Rose is arrested for high treason for the murder of Queen Tatiana, which was really annoying because Rose had nothing to do with it, but there's no alibi for her except for Adrian. And anyway, we get into this book. Rose is in jail. She has been told at the end of the last book by Abe, who is representing her on this murder trial, that if she is found guilty, she will not go to jail because it's high treason. She will be killed. So that's great. Rose spends most of the time in jail, and therefore she spends a lot of time going through her bond with Lissa, which I really appreciated. Lissa, who really should be given a vote on the council because one member of every royal family, except for Lissa's, gets to have a vote on the royal council, but Lissa doesn't because she's the last surviving member of her family, and you need at least one more member of your family to be able to have a vote. It's a very archaic law. But eventually, Lissa does end up, because Queen Tatiana's dead, she ends up being put up as a nominee to become the next queen and has to go through all these trials. The trials were very, very interesting. Along the way, Rose and Dimitri, Rose is broken out of jail before she even goes to the trial, and she and Dimitri run away to try and strategize what it is they're going to do next. And Rose was given a letter by Ambrose, who was the pleasure slave, or yeah, something like that anyway, of the Queen, because the Queen had written Rose a letter to tell her that Vasilisa indeed does have a sibling. So they track down the sibling. It ends up being someone we already know by the name of Jill Mastrano, and eventually, it takes a while, but eventually we end up taking Jill back to court, where Vasilisa has made it to the final two or final three nominees to be Queen, and they make the big reveal. Look, Vasilisa does actually have a sibling, and we can prove this, and now she at least gets to have a vote. So that's interesting. Rose nearly dies at the end of this book, but somehow she ends up healing herself and surviving. And Lissa didn't even help her with spirit or anything like that. She just ended up surviving. Lissa ends up becoming queen. Rose ends up, during the book, Rose and Dimitri get closer and closer again, even though Dimitri in the last book told her he doesn't want anything to do with her. Because they're in this situation where they're on the run, they get really close again. Dimitri keeps saying, I'm not going to steal you from another guy. It's not going to happen. You have to break up with him first. But then they end up getting together anyway, which really disappointed me. And Rose breaks off with Adrian, which also really disappointed me. But anyway, Rose ends up surviving. Lissa ends up being queen. Jill Mastrano is now a princess. And she's now with Dimitri, and Adrian's all alone. And that's the end. But I still appreciate this book. So both of these books got 5 stars from me. The series does continue in a spin-off called Bloodlines, and that follows our alchemist Sydney Sage and Jill Mastrano. I'll talk to you more about that during the week because I'm currently starting that series. But what did you think of Vampire Academy? What did you think of this very quick video? I'm going to leave it there and let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll see you again very soon. Mwah. Bye, guys. Bye. If only I could put these books back magically. Wow.